Thanks for choosing Jac-Knife Highway Pegs. Welcome to the Jac-Knife Highway Peg installation video. My name is Nick McKim. I'm with Innovative Metal Technologies. This video is going to go over a brief overview of what it takes to do the installation for both styles of floorboard. The two boards that these pegs fit on are the swept style floorboard, and we also have the standard style floorboard. The first thing you want to do with your kit is first open it up and make sure all the components are there. Each Jac-Knife Highway Peg kit includes a set of instructions, 2 pegs, 2 brackets, 4 1/4 20 pan head cap screws, 2 12 thou thick shim washers and 2 16 thou thick shim washers, 2 3/8 ball plungers, and 2 1/2 inch shoulder bolts. An overview of the tools required for the installation process are a 5/32 Allen wrench, a 1/4 inch Allen wrench, a number 8 flat driver bit, an 1/8 inch drill bit, a 17/64 drill bit, a center punch, a scriber, small file, a hammer, cordless drill, snips, needle nose pliers, a hand grinder with a flap disc wheel, a small die grinder, general purpose grease and or anti-seize compound, and blue Loctite. To start out, we're going to simply remove the floorboard inserts from each style of floorboard. To do this, we'll take a screwdriver and then we'll simply push in the rubber mounting bosses. That removes the floorboard insert. We'll do the same on the other style floorboard. The only difference between the two styles of floorboard is on the standard style floorboard. The rubber mounting bosses have to have a small portion of the end trimmed off to allow for clearance for the peg, and that's going to be on the one end and on the center boss. And you want to make sure that you don't remove too much material because this lip is for retention purposes. If you remove too much, your floorboard insert is going to fall off. After we've got that ready, we're going to go ahead and take the components it takes to make the assembly for one of the peg sides. We'll grab one of our shoulder bolts. We're going to need a ball plunger, and then we'll get to the shim washers in just a second. The first thing to do is inspect the shoulder bolt. Sometimes in the kits, a shoulder bolt might have a small burr on the inside of the head. This is an important mating surface. You want to make sure that it's burr free. One way to do that is simply to take a cordless drill. And we'll grab a small file. We'll run that along the inside of the head of the shoulder bolt. And that removes any burrs that might be there. Now with that, we're going to go ahead and we'll choose a shim washer. Each kit comes with 2 different styles of shim washer. One's a 16 thou thick shim washer and the other's a 12. And the reason for the difference in the thicknesses is simply to accommodate the difference in the coating between the black anodized and the chrome. We're going to assemble the shoulder bolt and we'll just visually check to see how the fit is. The only true way to find out what we have for clearance is simply to put this together and actuate the peg once it's tight. You're going to want a nice fit, you don't want excessive play, and you don't want any dragging, so that's why we have to be sure to choose the correct washer. We're going to go ahead and just double check to make sure that the thicker washer isn't a better choice. Just got a slight amount of dragging, so we're going to go with the thinner washer. Now that we've selected the right shim washer, we need to go ahead and install the ball plunger. And to do this, we're simply going to start it by hand, and then we're going to take a flat bit driver bit instead of a flat bit screwdriver. And this allows us to get proper engagement on the head of the ball plunger. It's necessary to do that to avoid any stripping out. We'll just go ahead and we'll screw that ball plunger all the way through the part just to make sure that it's free of any burrs or any external threads protruding out. We'll clean that out. Now we're going to go ahead and unscrew it again. And what we want is just a slight amount of that ball plunger to be protruding out of the bottom side of the peg. Now we're going to go ahead and get things fitted up. We'll apply a small amount of grease to the inside of the shoulder bolt. And now with the ball plunger, I like to use anti-seize for a lubricant on that. General purpose grease also works well. I happen to have both, so I'm going to use them. Now we'll go ahead and assemble the two pieces. To adjust the ball plunger, what we're going to do is screw it all the way down. Be sure not to bottom it out too hard. Once you've reached the bottom, you're going to back it up a quarter of a turn. And that should be the proper position. We'll just actuate this. And what we're doing is simply seating the ball plunger. We've got a nice crisp index. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the peg and just visually inspect it to make sure that there's no burrs or any dirt. We'll clean off both mating surfaces. Now we're ready for final assembly. We'll apply a small amount of grease to the shoulder bolt. We'll back out the ball plunger again because now we have to apply the blue Loctite, and it's important not to forget that. It's also important to make sure that you give the Loctite at least 30 minutes to set up before riding. That just ensures that you're not going to have any problems with the ball plunger vibrating or loosening up. We're ready for final assembly. We're going to put a little Loctite on the threads of this shoulder bolt. We'll want to make sure we lubricate it one final time. And throughout riding, it's important to make sure that periodically you remove the shoulder bolt so you can do routine maintenance simply by cleaning the surfaces and relubricating. Anytime you're riding in rain or a really dirty environment, it's a good idea just for common practice to remove things and keep them nice and clean. It's kind of like changing the oil in your car. We'll get the ball plunger set back down close. And then with anti-seize compound, we'll relubricate. Apply a small amount of grease again. Want to make sure we put blue Loctite on the threads of the shoulder bolt also. I'll go ahead and tighten everything down. We're going to index that ball plunger down to the bottom, and then we'll back it up a quarter turn again. And just go ahead and index it and make sure everything moves like it should. And we'll clean up the peg. And we have a final assembly. All right, now that we've got our peg assembly finished, we're going to move on, and we're actually going to lay out the position of the peg assembly. And we have to remove a little bit of material on the sides of the floorboard so we have clearance for the bracket. That'll be in this area and in this area. And on some occasions it's necessary to take a little bit of a cleanup with a grinding wheel right on the outside of this bracket because it's a stamped part. It's not always going to be square. And this is an important area because this forms the seat for the end of the bracket and also for the peg. So we're going to go ahead, roughly get it in the proper position. And with a marker, we're going to mark on the brackets where the clearance has to be ground out. We'll index a peg assembly, and we're also going to mark the location of where the hard stop is formed between the peg itself and this bracket. Sometimes it's necessary to remove a small amount of material on the outside of this bracket just because this is a stamped part. It's not always going to be square, and it's important to have that position identical for the end of the peg, and with this bracket we need a nice fit because that's the hard stop. Now that we've got our floorboard locations marked out, we're going to move on to the grinder. And with that, we're simply going to remove these areas of material with a flap disc wheel on the right angle grinder. I choose to use a flap disc wheel because it dissipates heat really well and it also removes material fast. When we remove this material, it's always important to wear safety glasses and to make sure this is fixed down to the table so it's not going to move. The worst thing in the world is to wind up missing a finger over this. Now we're going to move on to the grinder. We're going to fix the floorboard to the bench with some small adjustable clamps. I like to put some kind of a barrier between the board and the bench just to protect the chrome from the floor on the floorboard from scuffing. I just use a simple soft piece of wood. Now we'll move on to grinding. This is what the flap disc looks like. It's a great wheel to use. It dissipates heat and it removes a lot of material fast. And now we're just going to go in and remove the material where we've marked, and this will allow clearance for the peg when it's in the retracted position. Now just unclamp the floorboard. We'll go back over to the bench. Now that we've finished grinding the clearance we have to have, we'll just visually inspect it. And to do that, we're going to lay our assembly into the board and just look to make sure that we have the proper clearance and there aren't going to be any interference issues between the peg and the board itself. It's important to make sure that you have plenty of material removed. It's better to take a little bit extra than not enough and risk damaging your peg. Now that we've got what we have to have there, now we're going to move on to lay out the hole locations. And the nice part about this bracket, it also doubles as a template. So what we do is lay the peg assembly into position. We've got it indexed out. And with a scriber or a nail or whatever you happen to have, simply go in, scribe the location of the first hole, index the peg back to the retracted position, look down and visually make sure that that hole is on location with the bracket, and then inspect to make sure that the peg matches up with the outside contour of the floorboard. If your bracket isn't in the correct location, simply move it around a little bit, then go back and rescribe your hole. Now we'll check it in the extended position. We'll scribe our second hole. Like they always say, it's better to measure it twice than it is to have two holes where you should only have one. Now we're actually going to center punch our holes, And to do this, I like to put something underneath the floorboard just to prevent it from denting. As you notice, the outside isn't even with the inside of the floorboard. So if we can just lay a couple blocks of wood or plastic or whatever you happen to have underneath, we'll go in with our small prick punch. Make sure that our holes are going to be on location. Now with the 1/8 inch pilot drill, we're going to pre-drill these holes. To do this, we're going to grab a piece of wood and lay back underneath the floorboard. Keep you from drilling into your bench. The 1/8 inch drill, simply start drilling. We'll move on with our clearance drill for our 1/4 inch cap screws. Now that we've finished drilling our holes, we simply need to deburr the outside edges to remove any sharp corners. To do this, we're going to use a small air grinder, or you can use a Dremel tool, whatever you happen to have. Now we'll just come in with a small grinding wheel. Then we've removed all the burrs on the outsides of the boards. Now we're going to move on to final assembly. We're going to lay our peg assembly down. Just visually inspect to make sure that our holes are in the correct location. We'll grab 2 of our button head cap screws. And we'll do a preliminary fit just to make sure we have correct clearance with the edge of the board. One thing we want to look for is, because this is a stamped board, sometimes the outside edges of this floorboard are going to be uneven along this contour. What we're doing by a preliminary assembly is to check and make sure that there's clearance between the peg and the edge of this board. If for some reason this is uneven, there could be some interference along here. And by checking this, we can find out if we have to go over to the grinder again. Some cases it's necessary to just take a light skim cut across this edge, simply to even it up. And when we do that, we'll use the flap disc wheel again and make sure the rotation of the wheel is towards the inside of the floorboard. And by doing this, we eliminate any chances for chipping of the chrome. So now that we've got this in position, we're going to go ahead and check. Simply tighten things down a little bit more. Doesn't look like we have any issues with this particular floorboard. So now we'll remove it and we're ready to Loctite our fasteners down for final assembly. It's not necessary to remove them all the way on this. We can back them out halfway. We'll come in with the blue Loctite again and apply some to both fasteners. Come back and tighten these down. We want to double check just to make sure that, once again, the peg matches up with the outside contour of the board. Sometimes it's necessary to come in just with a screwdriver and we'll apply a little pressure to force this bracket out to the outer edge. Sometimes this outer edge flexes the bracket in slightly, and we'll hold that out while we tighten things down. There we have the final assembly. We'll index it a few times just to make sure that everything functions like it should. Double check the tightness of these. Now with that done, we reinstall the top floorboard insert. And to do that, we simply use a pair of needle nose pliers. Grab the ends of the rubber bumpers, pull them back through the hole. Now we're ready to clean the board up and mount it back on the bike. Hopefully this video has cleared up any questions you have with the installation process. If you still have further questions, please feel free to contact myself using our website, which is www.imtnebraska.com, or you can also contact me by phone at 402-474-7121. And once again, thank you for purchasing Jac-Knife Highway Pegs, and ride safe.